right, well, hello. And I want to say, as I get ready to start, that I'm thrilled to be here and really excited to have a chance to talk to a group of people who share something that I think is a passion for new ideas and new energy. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you know that life is a lot like walking on a tightrope without a net. And it's both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. So I'm delighted to be in a room full of my kindred spirits. I also have to say that, how many of you were here last month when Bob McInerney spoke? Okay. I just have to say that I saw Bob McInerney's presentation on the website. Great place to go look. And I found out that Bob came with Mr. Science, Mr. Wizard experiments. And I was really intimidated because the tools of my trade are far less interesting and exciting, as my fellow banker knows. But what I thought I'd do, because my tools of the trade, money, I was going to play a game of Liar's Poker for those of you who are familiar with that game. But I decided instead I'm going to give out a tool of my trade to everyone in the room, talk just a little bit about money before I begin my presentation, and then I'm going to have everyone in the room is going to have a chance to win $20. I'm going to give away $20 3 times with a couple of questions about money. But I have to have help from my bankers to give out the money. And by the way, I know how much money there is, and I know how many people have it. So fulfilling the audit function will not be a problem for me. So I'm going to hand to Scott Lewis, a really honorable, honest man, and Linda Barnes. Cash, I've tried to divide it into 2 stacks. And I'm going to take just a second to talk about the tool of my trade, which is money. It's always interesting when bankers get together, and by the way, I'm thrilled to have fellow bankers in the room, both from Triumph and from Paragon. I will say that we are folks who have lived through and learned a lot in the last 5 years. It's been an entertaining time, so as the recession has, all of us have experienced it. I think bankers may have experienced it disproportionately. So we're happy to be here. But while I was doing this project, I went to find out a little bit about money, and I want you to know a couple of fun facts you can share tonight with your friends, or I don't know, the next time you're really at a slow cocktail party. I'm not sure. But I want you to know that there's really strong evidence that the very first money that was ever, the very first currency that was ever used was actually cattle in 9000 BC. And for those of you who have small purses, you know that carrying cattle will be a bit of a challenge. But it was in fact the way that people were first able to barter. And cattle had enormous value because they could produce both milk and meat products for people who were trying to survive. So that was in 9000 BC, and I wasn't there, so I can't validate that. But I can tell you that there's also evidence that the very first coin that was ever created was actually a bronze coin in the shape of a cow, which I would really love to have. That would be a really cool charm on a necklace. It would be. But anyway, very first currency was a bronze cow in 2000 BC, and they weighed the cow, and that was how they exchanged currency. So over time, people figured out there had to be easier ways to do it. And believe it or not, the first people who figured out that they should print the value of the currency on the coin were the people who ultimately, now Turkey, what is now Turkey. And they stamped the value on the coins, which made it a lot easier to exchange with people. But the dollar bill, which I think is pretty cool. Paper money, by the way, came into existence in the 1700s. And it was the French. Not a surprise for those of us who are aware of their chic style and sense of purpose. They had attractive purses, and they didn't want to put cows in them. So they invented the whole paper currency thing, which I think is really a cool thing to know about. But I will also tell you that when we started U.S. currency, started out, it was the replacement, even all the way up into the early 1800s, people were still trading in barter, mostly deer skins and elk skins. And an elk buck is the reason that a dollar bill is called a buck, which I did not know, because a unit of a buck skin was roughly equivalent to what became the unit of a dollar. Fun fact, now you know. Moving through this, I want to just make note that monopoly money, by the way, about twice as much monopoly money has been printed as real currency. And if we stacked monopoly money on top of monopoly money, it would go 1,100 miles out into space, which is really useful for those of you who spend more time with the monopoly money than the real stuff, which is sadly true for most of us. I want to mention that the pyramid that's on the back of your currency, if you take a look at it, for those of you who have a chance, you actually have a dollar bill now, so I know you can take a look. The pyramid is actually the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States of America. And the reason that the pyramid is unfinished is because the founders wanted to be certain that everyone knew that our work in progress, that our work as a nation was not done. So it's unfinished because we're always going to be continuing to build, which I think is really cool. The other thing that I want you all to know, and by the way, for everybody in this room as an entrepreneur, our work is really always unfinished. The clock on the back of a $100 bill, those of you who did not see the movie National Treasure or don't remember it clearly, you'll remember that they were standing in Independence Hall and they were trying to remember what the time was on the back of the $100 bill. The time on the back of a $100 bill is 4:10, but no one knows why. So I have no information other than, and by the way, you can only see that with a really gigantic magnifying glass, because I did go down to the tellers this morning because I don't have any $100 bills and look and see, and you can't see it until you get like one of those jeweler's loupes. It requires a great deal more magnification than my glasses provide. And then the last thing that I will say, just because I think it's kind of sad, is that two important facts. First of all, you know why there are grooves on the side of coins? Anybody? There are grooves on the side of coins because in the old days, when coins were made out of precious metals, silver and gold, people used to shave off the side of their coins flakes of the silver and gold. And so they put grooves on the side of the coin so that they would know if a coin had been damaged or altered. But there were people who made their money by shaving the precious metals off the side of coins, which is why they're grooves. And there are 119 grooves on a quarter and 118 grooves on a dime. I do not know why that happened either. And I also will tell you that it seems impossible given their relative size, but oh well. I did not count them. All right. And the last thing I'll say, U.S. currency is green because at the time that in 1929, when the Bureau of Engraving standardized the size of currency and went through a long process to make sure that our currency was not easily counterfeited, there were two reasons that it was green. First of all, this is the reason that everybody would like to say. Green is more stable, it's resistant to chemical change, it wears better over time. But the real deal is that the guy at the Bureau of Engraving said there were like 17 times as many things of the green dye as there were of every other color. So I'm pretty sure we might have blue money if blue had been the primary thing. And the last thing, the only woman who's ever appeared on paper money, Martha Washington. And she was in circulation for a very brief time. So I'm just sad to say that women have not made it to the front of the currency. So perhaps someday we will. Now, for just a moment of fun and to give away more money so that you leave with more than $1, I'm going to have a moment where I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'm going to identify the first couple of people, and the person who comes closest to the correct answer will be awarded the $20 bill. So my first question is, does anyone know how long the average $1 bill is in circulation? Yes, in the back.
I believe it's 18 months.
Okay, 18 months. I'm going to give a couple of other people a chance. Yes, ma'am? How much?
3 months.
3 months, okay. Somebody else? One more person? Just guess. There's no pain. Yes?
A year.
A year. Actually, the average $1 bill is in circulation for 22 months. So in the very back, 18 months. Closest answer, so you get $20. I'm going to pass this back, trusting y'all to answer to the gentleman who stood behind. All right, second question, which is, does anyone know what the largest piece of paper money ever printed by the U.S. currency was? And again, there's no pain in guessing, guys. You got to guess. Just throw up your hand. Largest, yes. 10,000, yes.
100,000.
100,000, yes.
$1 million.
$1 million. Okay, the correct answer is 100,000, and it had Woodrow Wilson on it, and it was in circulation for 15 minutes. It was a Federal Reserve note that was sent from one Federal Reserve bank to another. 100,000 is the correct answer. Okay, and the last one, I think this is truly interesting, and I'll really start doing my real presentation. But I didn't want to be outdone by the science experiment. So please remember when you see Bob, tell him that I gave away money. But how much money is per person is in circulation in the United States of America? How much per person do we have in circulation in both paper and currency? Yes. $500, okay. And bucks, I like the fact you use bucks, yes?
$3.
$3. Okay, well, you've already won. I can't let you win again. Somebody else who hasn't won, raise their hand. Yes?
$700.
$700 per person. The correct answer is $823, which I think is like very, very close. So good for you. All right, I thought that was really all interesting because, as I said, I was not to be outdone by Bob McInerney's science experiments, but more importantly, I did think it would be a nice way to sort of break the ice. I'm going to have a moment where I'm going to promise I'm going to try to be brief, but I want to talk about doing battle with giants, which is probably an interesting topic for everybody in this room, and probably one that you wouldn't expect to hear from a banker. But I want to talk about the fact every entrepreneur, every business person, everybody who's ever started something, and that includes our folks at Triumph, our folks at Paragon Bank, we all know what it's like to step into the fray in the first time in a market which, by the way, in Memphis, Tennessee, when we started our company, we were definitely doing battle with giants. And there they are. When I say we're doing battle with giants, what that means is that in Memphis, Tennessee, we are a geographic oligopoly. A geographic oligopoly means that in our market, the percent of business controlled by the top 3 players was greater than 75%. So when we started Independent Bank at the time, the 3 banks that were the members of the geographic oligopoly, First Tennessee Bank, Union Planters Bank, and National Bank of Commerce, controlled over 75% of the deposits in our market, which is a pretty daunting thing. Let me add to that on the moment that we made the decision to turn in an application and start Independent Bank, we became the 35th bank in the market. A market crowded with competitors. So when you think about why that happens, entrepreneurs all share that same. First of all, in every category in which you all compete, there's somebody who's the 800-pound gorilla. I hope for each of you that it's you. But in the event it's not, you understand what happens to each of us when we step into the ring and we're battling. We're David battling Goliath. So one of the reasons that we made the decision, all of us who have that entrepreneurial spirit can understand that rock-solid conviction that you have a better way, and you know something that can make your business different and better and distinguished. So my business partner and I, and by the way, I just have to say he's not here today, but we run a most extraordinary organization because we really are a partnership. We are co-chairs of the bank, and we really do run it as a partnership. And for everyone in the room, we have several independent bankers here. They can attest to the fact that sometimes that can be an interesting and exciting thing. But our decision to get into this business, we had many years of banking experience. We were both a product of great organizations. We had been with First Tennessee Bank to start our careers, and then we had spent time with Boatman's Bank, which was at the time the 8th largest bank in the United States of America. So we had a chance to be a part of big organizations, and we had developed that entrepreneurial sense that we had an idea that we could do it better and we could do it differently. We've been, knock on wood, extraordinarily fortunate in the last almost 16 years. We were number 35. I really am sorry to the gods of bigger competitors. But anyway, we started at 35, and we've now worked our way up. We are the 4th largest bank in the Shelby County marketplace, and we are the 2nd largest bank that's headquartered in the city. And we're very excited and very proud of that opportunity. But what I thought I'd talk about today is not Independent Bank, but instead talk about what happens when you go do battle with giants and how you can take them on in a way that is meaningful and where you can hope to have greater success. And I think that understanding that proposition really comes down to something that all of us have been focused on learning how to do from the time we were very young, and that is to tell our story in a compelling way, to communicate. And I want to just offer to you that this is a really tough time to go out into the world and try to share your story with anyone. Do you know that today the average American consumer receives over 1,500 commercial messages a day? 1,500. That comes down to everything from the commercials you hear on the radio, to the signs that you see going to and from a business location, to the television spots that you try to speed through on TiVo, to each of the, to an ad in a magazine, and even to an impression that you see in a logo on a shirt or an item on a purse. So there's this huge volume of messages that are being received all the time by everyone. We spend in this country, in a good year, just over $450 billion in advertising and marketing. And in a bad year, about $200 billion in advertising. And I would just offer to you that one of the challenges that we have these days, and in some ways I think it may be heresy to say this, we may be wasting more money in marketing than in any other activity. And it's not because marketing is not an important and extraordinarily effective tool. It's because we're literally shouting at each other, trying to get our message shared. But in this process of really shouting at each other, we're forgetting some of the bedrock things that we need to understand about what we're trying to say, who we're trying to say it to, and then also thinking about whether they're really ready to hear what we have to say. So I thought I'd take just a moment today to tell you a story that has really been important to me, and sort of part of my education as a business person and banker, and that is my visit with the people who taught me about branding and positioning. When I was very young, very, very young, a very, very long time ago, I was working for First Tennessee Bank in an area that was a nationwide check clearing service. And because I was only 24 years old, and because I didn't know yet what I didn't know, I read an article in a magazine by two guys named Jack Trout and Al Reese. Jack Trout and Al Reese wrote a book, literally called Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. And Jack and Al had a huge organization, actually an advertising agency in New York. And because, again, I was young and didn't know better, a friend of mine and I who read the article decided we were going to call Jack Trout and Al Reese and see if we could come visit with them. Because, gosh, they'd be delighted to see two 25-year-old kids with no advertising money just to chat it up about what we wanted to learn. And please keep in mind that when I was 24 years old, there were no yellow pages. Literally, one had to go find a New York directory or call information services, track down names, track down numbers. But we were pretty committed because we were young and foolish. And we got through to information in New York City, and we got through to the number for the Trout Reese agency. And we called that number, and we asked to speak to Jack Trout or Al Reese. It didn't matter which one of the named partners came to the phone. And one of the things that I think maybe sometimes life is really lovely. And the person who was on the phone, first of all, had to hear me ask for Jack Trout and Al Reese several times because they couldn't understand what I was saying because I was a Southern girl. I said, may I please speak? So it took him a few minutes to work through it, but they said, hold on a second. And Jack Trout was so fascinated that the person who came to him to say there's a girl on the phone from Tennessee, and she sounds like she just fell off the back of a really bad milk cart truck, and she wants to talk to you. He got on the phone and talked to me, which is a lesson for all of us to remember. Taking a call is a great thing, especially from somebody that is calling with no credentials to earn your answering. So anyway, Jack Trout got on the phone, talked to us for a few minutes, and invited us to come to New York City. which was pretty spectacular. Then I had to go convince my boss, who had no idea that I was hanging out on the phone talking to Al Reese and Jack Trout, that he needed to help me pay for my trip. But they did. So First Tennessee Bank allowed Peggy Perhack and I, a very dear friend, to make the trip to New York City to visit with Jack Trout and Al Reese. And they told us the story of their thoughts on positioning, sort of how it worked, what you need to understand, how it affects your brand. And so for just a minute today, I'm going to tell you the 3 really important things that they told me and taught me, and then let you think about how it applies to your business, to your personal life, to everything you want to be, to everything you ought to be, and maybe to all the things you might not be doing perfectly in your current place. The thing that they told me that I think I remember more than anything else, they said, I want you to think for just a moment about the way that your mind organizes information. And that is, I want you to remember that there's a very short ladder in your head where you store information. So, for example, if I need to go buy a television set, I have a short ladder of television set makers that I have on my list. And they're not all the same. All of us are influenced by all the messages we've received. But just take for a moment, if you go in to look for an item, you probably have in your head that very short list up to 3, which is the rule of 3s. It happens, by the way, in nature and life and everything else. The rule of 3s. Your brain can only accommodate so much information. So you sort of have this little ladder, and on the little ladder you have room for 3 things. So if you're trying to work your way into people's purchase and prospect lists, you got to get yourself on their ladder. And you have a chance to either expand their ladder or knock somebody else off the ladder. The choice is yours. But I want you to be clear about the fact that we don't have time to think about 50 alternatives as consumers, because our brain is full of everything else. So you really have to find a way to make yourself relevant on that short list that people are keeping in their heads. And they keep it in their head of if they're going to buy a house, if they're going to buy a car, if they're going to open a bank account. So your strategy needs, in whatever business that you're in, not for profit, I want to get to people's list. I want to be on their list. I want to find my way onto that short ladder. And it's been validated over and over again in my business career that that really is how life works. We only have so much room for information. You have to find a way to make yourself relevant, meaningful on that list. So how are you going to do that? I mean, how am I going to... I started... The oldest bank in the city of Memphis had a 172-year head start on me. So they had a lot of equity in the market. The top 3 banks controlled over 75% of the deposits. So what am I going to do? Well, it was pretty obvious that I couldn't go with the first strategy. The first strategy being be the first. Be the first. It's a really important concept. Who's the first person who flew across the Atlantic in a plane? Lindbergh. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. The guy who did it second did it faster with less fuel in an inferior aircraft. Nobody remembers Bert. He is not even a footnote in history. You have to go really work to find his name. And that rule is really important. Think about, I call a copy a Xerox. They were the first. When I want to send a package somewhere overnight, I FedEx it, regardless of whose name I'm putting it on. When I'm crying, I want a Kleenex. I don't say tissue. The point is, the people who get there first. Coca-Cola is my passionate brand. I'm in big trouble if they ever stop making it, friends. It's not going to be a good thing. I hoarded the real Coke when they went to the new Coke. For those of you who lived through that debacle, we literally stacked it in our garage to the ceiling. So the point is, though, Coke, the first in its category. And when people go in to order a Pepsi, a Dr. Pepper, whatever, they frequently say, I'll take a Coke. It's just how we translate. So if you have a shot at getting there first, sprint. Do not walk. Sprint to the first position. because there's huge advantage to you if you're able to do that. But if you're not there first, if you're not the person who made it to the exit door before everyone else did in the survival of the fittest mode, then try to do the second thing that they told me I needed to learn how to do. And that is, if you don't get there first, create a new category. So, who is the first woman to fly across the Atlantic? Solo. Amelia Earhart. Okay, once again, Lindbergh, Earhart. It's a poor Bert did it before Amelia did. Once again, no one knows his name. But Amelia Earhart created a new category. And clever people in marketing, branding, and positioning make themselves relevant in a new way. They create a different kind of category. I want to talk to you about one of my favorite stories of all time in this reinvention, because it gives you an idea. Cirque du Soleil. Everybody, Cirque du Soleil they have a Cirque du Soleil for everything. I mean, I'm literally getting to the point now where I think they have an Elvis Cirque du Soleil, and people around the corner doing tricks Cirque du Soleil. I mean, and they sell out over and over again because they created this new category for themselves. Do you know why they created a new category for themselves? Circuses were disappearing. The resources required to transport all of the animals and all the equipment and all of the stuff made it nearly impossible. Their idea felt old and not fresh. Everybody who had ever seen the circus was nostalgic about it, and you'd take your child one time maybe to see a circus, but you wouldn't take your child over and over again. So you had this incredibly expensive idea and this dislocation which made it irrelevant to a huge segment of the population. So the guys at Cirque du Soleil who had a real circus, think Ringling Brothers, only not, sat down in a room and said, what are we going to do? And they determined that the least expensive component of their business was transporting the people. And they had people who had unusual skills and extraordinary talents. And they said, what if we made a show out of the people? Which is a brilliant idea. They reinvented themselves and created a whole new category. So for all of us who are now scrambling, I keep trying to figure out, I'm a Southern girl with a thick accent. Okay, there's a bunch of those. You got to keep trying to think about how do you create your personal brand, your business brand, and your category brand so that you create advantage for yourself. And that was, first rule, be first. Second rule, create a new category. Always an entertaining thought. For those of you smart enough to do it, that's really good. Third rule, and there's many more, but this is the last one I have really got time to talk about it, is be clever. Be honest and be clever. And my favorite example of this is Avis. When Avis was starting in their business as a rental car company, Hertz was not only the 800-pound gorilla, they were the 800-pound gorilla with 70 friends that were also 750 pounds. They owned the market completely. And they were so dominant on the ladder that when people were renting a car, they were getting to that point where they only thought, I'm going to get a Hertz. So the Avis people said, okay, we want to have a rental car business because we own all these cars. And we're getting crushed by Hertz. I mean, absolutely. They're not just beating us, they're crushing us. And at the moment when they were down to their last dollars and their last opportunity, somebody said, well, if only people knew we'd just try harder. We just try harder. And so in a moment of extraordinary marketing clarity, they went out to the world and said, Avis, we try harder. Who doesn't love the guy who says, Hertz is the 800-pound gorilla, but I really try harder. I'm really doing it more. They didn't displace Hertz, let me be clear. The 800-pound gorilla is still the 800-pound gorilla, but they became a 400-pound gorilla because they were smart enough and clear enough to understand what their message really was. And they developed a message that resonated with people. So what's the most honest thing you can say about yourself or your business or your opportunity, think about a way that you communicate that is clever and endearing and engaging and makes people kind of want to root for you, because that's part of your strategy. So if you have a chance, be first. If you don't have a chance to be first and you can do it, create a new category. And if you can't do that, make yourself honestly approachable and sort of endearing. But I'll tell you this, and this is the message that I would leave you with as I talk about creating a brand and creating an image. And I am passionate about what independent bank means to us internally and what we hope it means to the people who are our consumers. Down to our logo and what it physically is. If you look at our eye, it's actually a person with their hands outstretched to serve you. And that's what we are trying to be in the marketplace. And we've been so disciplined about how we use our logo. It's always in the first person customer perspective. We've tried to be disciplined about what we say, to be clear and to be consistent and to be authentic and to be honest. And I will tell you that if you violate those rules, every consumer from a 6-year-old all the way up to an 85-year-old will have that detector that lets them know that your message is not honest, you're really not being clear, you're really not being consistent. So whatever story you're electing to sell in terms of yourself as a brand, in terms of your business as a brand, in terms of what you want to have people think and know about you when they walk away, make sure that you're telling yourself and them the truth. Because if you don't, you will fail. Consumers are great discerners of what's real and what's not. So I'll say this to you as I get ready to leave. Building your brand and position has value to you because of this. The dollars you spend, if you get clear about your brand and your position, the dollars you spend will be more efficiently and effectively spent. You'll be in a position where you're able to tell yourself and others your message consistently. You'll be able to replicate your DNA, which is, I think, the most important thing. Every one of us, every company, every family, every business, we all have a DNA that if you care about it and you love it, you want to replicate it over and over again. So you create this authentic and replicable DNA of who you are. But finally, you're going to create an equity with the people who matter the most. And that's the people who are going to buy your product or buy somebody else's. So when you're stepping out today and you think about it, all of us have a chance to be serious in our reinvention, to think about what we really are, to think about what we really want to be, to say to ourselves that being on the ladder is really critical, and we got to figure out how we're going to get there, because that's what's going to make you successful. So that's a few moments of my entrepreneurial secret sauce. And I thank